This is how you come down. Boom. Back in the cave. One hell of a storm last night. Blew down a great big fir tree across the road. Power was out, whole 9 yards, right? Like storms do. Still got the my brain and body's working on the other side of the planet time. Kind of sucks. Trying to get dialed back in. So I was wide awake at about 3 o'clock in the morning this time. So I'll power through today, making sure I don't have any naps or anything, and get back in my game. Sucks being this frazzled, but whatever. Now, where do we go from here? More voices being heard. Now listen, the other day, I wrote a super long, overly detailed one, but you know, a lot of people say, why don't you just cut through to the meat of the story? Well, if I do that, then I become guilty of leaving out some part of somebody's story, which I don't do. Right? Follow me? And then once I get so committed into reading an email, which I don't even know how long some of them are, what do? Do you decide, well, no, I'm not going to read this one. They're not going to be heard. And then you're that far into it, it's like, well, you know, it's not like I have time growing off of trees here. So it's going to be shared. Anyway, there you go. That's why I don't, that's why I will continue reading, right? Unless I get something that's absolutely blatantly in your face trying to mess with me and my time. And that's pretty obvious when I've had some real doozies, right? But it's no big deal. You pick it up right away, but so everybody's way of telling a story is different. There's definitely no reason to get mad at anybody or insult anybody. It's just the way it is. So, I still do absolutely appreciate everybody's time they take to send in their experiences and their knowledge with us. And I understand, and hopefully all you understand, that not everybody's going to deliver the same, right? But hopefully I can get it across to everyone that's listening and about to send in what they have to help us, that they will take note and do as best they can, right? Best they can to share their experience and all the details, and at the same time, best they can to try to hopefully save us a little time for other people to be heard as well, because there's a one hell of a lineup, right? But anyway, I just thought I'd hit that topic up with everybody and explain to you why I do not leave anything out and why I will continue reading, because I can't, it's not, if I chop out any part of anybody's email, boom, then I've done what people have done consistently that makes us a little frustrated, right? So that's why I won't do it. I won't chop out. If somebody and some other people add on, you know, maybe share the rest of this, is up to you. It's not up to me. You share it with me, you've shared it with the world. You tell me not to share it, I don't share it. That's it. It's not up to me. I don't leave it up to me. I'm not the one. I will never be, no human being is in that position to decide what you should or shouldn't hear. It's what I'm saying. Ramble babbling. Now, second coffee. Here we go. Let's get into it before I start rambling on. I'll probably ramble eventually, but I'll try not to in the beginning, all right? Now, this is titled, Sasquatch Response to My Husband's Death. That's not your average title. Hi, Steve. I tried sending a handwritten story from last night, but it doesn't show the pictures, just file numbers, and they're all out of order. I really hate computers and the fake news that they make life so easy. Bullshit. So I'll send it this way and tell it. I've written before about our encounters, at least a couple of them. The Sasquatch seemed to watch over my husband. We're on a farm in Saskatchewan, right by a community pasture. We saw signs of the presence, and I saw a large dark brown one standing in the kitchen, watching. As paramedics wheeled my husband out of the house on a stretcher. Wow. He looked concerned and compassionate. That was one of many ambulance rides before my husband had to go for a long-term care at the age of 61 for his own safety. After 4 years, on January 17th, 2014, my husband died. I'm sorry to hear that. I told the Sasquatch that he died that evening and carried on with the formalities that accompany a death. Last night, January 27th, they came to pay their respects. Hold on a minute. When was this sent? This is recent. After 4 years, on January 17th, 2014, my husband died. January 27th, they came to pay their respects. Last night, January 27th. All right, moving on. I stepped out of the house into the cold Saskatchewan evening air to go feed the bottle-fed lamb when I heard the owl hoot. I hooted back to let them know I heard them, and they hooted back in a lower tone. I knew it was them. I told them I was going to feed the lamb and would be back, so I did that. When I came back to the front of the house that faces south, where the garage is, the yard is open all the way over to the left, east, where the hip roof barn is. From my step looking south to the shop and trees scanning your eyes to the far left is open for miles with pastures, hayland, scrub brush, and a yard a quarter mile away. Think semicircle, shaped like your windshield wipers when they clear snow off your windshield. Ball, diamond-shaped view of that side of the yard. Well, I spoke to the Sasquatch that just hooted, and they hooted again. Then another one hooted, and then another one. Think 12 o'clock position, then 11 o'clock, then 10, then 9, going backwards, but having 6 positions between the 12 and 9 o'clock. There were 6 different voices, tones, hooted from 6 different positions between the shop, 12 o'clock position, and the barn, 9 o'clock position, if that makes any sense. So in other words, the left top quadrant of my yard was surrounded by at least 6 Sasquatch or groups. They all took turns hooting in different tones and did this 2 or 3 times. I spoke to them and thanked them. Then I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I heard, think in terms of a puppy whimpering, or a child sobbing, but in low tone, more like a man sobbing. I heard. It's tough for me to read these sounds up, but I'm gonna read out what's typed in. Whoa, whoa, hew, hew. It was sobbing that ended by blending into an owl hoot, and then he did that again. And then I heard each of them, from their different positions between the barn and the shop, actually do the same sobbing / owl hoot, each in their separate voice tone, and they did that each in turn over 2 times each. Some 3 times, and the big one to the south did that again. They were truly mourning for my husband and myself. Then the big one hooted again, and I cried and invited them to my personal farewell party for my husband. I decided to let go of all the things that we may be inclined to hold on to, like the crazy insulated plaid farmer's coat / shirt that he wore, which I hugged him in every time I went to visit, etc. I invited them to come, and I felt they were asking for me to do it after dark so they could come after dark, and I said, sure. And they did come. After dark, the dogs were doing a lot of barking on several sides of the yard, getting quite worked up, and I heard some louder coyote sounds that made me think they're telling the dogs to bug off. I cleaned the snow out of the fire pit and made a nice hot fire, and in my own ceremony said a prayer, and burned all my husband's clothing that he always wore, and some other effects. We have to let go sometime, and I have to move forward without holding on to the material things of what was and what was. So I burnt his things, letting the smoke arise to heaven in the dark, and said a prayer. I let his soul free, no holding on. Just go to the light. It felt so peaceful. Then I went around to the front again and spoke to them again and thanked them. I have had mine speak before, but it's a lady that speaks, and this time it was different. But I heard in myself that they are with me, watching over me, and will help me, and they love and appreciate me and my love for my husband. Then I said goodnight and went in. Today my house feels settled, emotionally clear, and at peace. I know I can go on from here and dive into the next chapter of my life and all the new adventures and challenges, and it'll be okay. Thank you for this platform to share our stories. I have a whole Bible study comparing Sasquatch spiritual beliefs with the Bible. They're amazingly similar. I'd like to share that with you. Sometime, if you want to hear more, you can even call me at or just for you, and I'll tell you about it if you want. Thanks again. Corleone from Saskatchewan. Well, that was interesting. Sounds like definitely a personal experience. And for your average person listening to that, you're probably going to go, huh? Right? But I think as we go along, we are going to have to accept the fact that there are a lot of people out there who are in contact with these other people. It's just all there is to it. Right? There's no getting out of that one. Not your average email, but I wish you well, and I appreciate you sending that in. And it will be confusing to a lot of people to hear that, right? And try to relate to it in some way. But for some others, it won't. And I know they're listening as well. So, there you go. And it brings to mind me nearing my potential trip to the south of the U.S., where I think shit's about to fly, but we'll see what happens. And I will be investigating myself personally, directly, looking into and learning from people who are in the exact same position today and have been for a while. And do I believe that to be true? Yep, I do. So, I wish you good luck to the kind lady that emailed us. And keep us posted if you've got something that you think can help us. Send me more, for sure. All right? All right. Here's another one. Mark, this is red. This is titled, A Lifetime of Connections with the Mountain People, bracket, Sabe, end bracket. Hey, Steve and community, greetings. Sitting here listening to your latest, a story comes to mind I would like to share with you and our family, the community. First and foremost, yes, the Sabe and their families exist and are real. I can honestly say that after a lifetime of experiences. A little about me. I was born at the base of the Seven Devils at Riggins, Idaho. Following my dad's work, a district engineer for the USFS, we moved to Dale, Oregon. A dream for a young man that loves to fish and hunt. Throughout my life, Dale always drew me back for hunting and fishing. My wife and I eventually made extra cash dropping hunters and their camps into the North Fork of the John Day Wilderness. I've had many, let's call them, meetings and connections with this Sabe tribe and people, a few of which you have read. To continue with my story, one year, 1979 to be exact, we ran out of work building bridges. I guess we built them too fast. So my wife's adopted aunt and uncle that owned and operated Hidden Valley Horse Ranch had been telling us, no, begging us to come help them. Why? Well, Buddy was fast approaching his 100th birthday. That he did live until and through, and his wife Louise was just a few years younger and disabled from taking a hit from a bale of hay that fell from the top of the haystack and breaking her neck. Oh my God, that would suck. The help they needed was breaking and training some 20-ish horses. Buddy had fallen behind on, and they wanted to start taking in kids for the summer on their famous ranch. The story starts with Uncle Bud telling me one night that he could harvest elk every hunting season from his 6,000-acre ranch that bordered the Elkhorn Elk Management Area, but that he didn't feel it was sporting. So I thought, what the hell? Let's take Bud camping in the John Day Wilderness and see how he did. So to my surprise, he wanted to take 3 horses as well, for him, myself, and my wife, and take his little ancient camp trailer. So with 2 pickups, we hooked up and headed for my favorite high mountain retreat and hunting grounds. Now, mind everyone, Bud has retired from guarding gold shipments out of the Elkhorn Mountains and had finished his life of work working as a high mountain guard at Porcupine Guard Station that's about 15 miles above his ranch on a ridgetop in the Elkhorn Mountain Range. He had also guided many, many years of his life in the same range, so the mountains and wildlife that lived there were nothing strange or new to him. He's had a wicked life. I'd love to have been sat down and talked to him for a few days straight. So we arrived at a base camp that was located about a quarter mile above the ridgetop of the Wilderness Range. We spent a quiet evening the first night and a great day riding the wilderness the next day, taking in and seeing elk, mule deer, blue grouse, and everything wild and native to the area. I was mentally in a part of my life that I was working 7 days a week between construction and the horse ranch, and for some reason, although I had many experiences with the saw-bay throughout my life, I basically pushed everything to the back of my mind. I just enjoyed hunting, fishing, and the wilderness. But the second night would bring everything back to the forefront of my mind and brain. At about 3 a.m., I was awakened by the horses stirring with nervous energy. Then, from a rock knob about 200 yards above camp, the deepest body-vibrating roar that continued for 15 to 20 seconds, it seemed. Bud sat straight up in bed and said, "What the F is that? And where's my gun?" I said, "Your gun's under the right side of your mattress." And I don't know what the F that was. One of the guys that I had introduced to the area and hunting there said, "We've heard that before, and we call them big bull growlers." I said, "Well, maybe, but I've heard big bulls bugle all my entire life, and I've never heard anything like that." It was so loud. You could actually feel it go into and through your body. My hair is standing up right now just typing this. Uncle Buddy said, "That wasn't any elk I've ever heard." That night and the rest of the trip was pretty normal and quiet. Uncle Buddy had done so well at the 7,000-foot elevation, I asked him if he'd like to hunt there this fall. He had seen several bulls and some nice mountain mule deer bucks, and he said, "Hell yes." So we returned that fall with a neighboring rancher that had hunted and guided Alaska as well for reinforcements. We'll just call him B. B had about 200 elk living on his property that bordered Bud's and the game preserve property, and he had expressed an interest in getting a really big bull. So I took him under wing opening morning and said, "Follow me. We're going in at 3 a.m. if you're good with that." B said, "Heck yeah, let's go." So at 3 a.m., we saddled up and headed deep into the backcountry. We picketed the horses at daylight and started trekking up the creek trail. We hadn't gone 100 yards, and I'll be damned if that same roar cut loose on the bench just above us that we had just came through riding in from camp. B looked at me, his eyes as big as dinner plates, and said, "What the F was that?" I said, "The boys think it's a giant old bull. They call him the Growler, but no one has ever seen him." I said, "You said you wanted a big bull. He's just up on that next bench we just rode through. If you want him, go get him." B then asked which way is camp. I pointed and said that way, about 3 miles. That was the last I saw of B that season, and he never ever went back in there. And he didn't ever want to go back in there. I've had many experiences over the years, 3 sightings, some alone and one with my wife, and yes, they are real. With several 100 years of hunting and mountain experience, we had never heard that ear-shattering roar before. To this day, I enter the woods with a short speech of peace and safety. You've read another of my experiences. Right now, my thumb and iPhone are tired, so I'll end this here. Be safe, have fun, be young. Watch your six. Until next time, g'day. All right, man. Appreciate that. Everyone, not everyone, but the description of that roar is basically the same all around the planet, right? It's so hard for myself and probably thousands of people out there learning and listening. It's hard to picture hearing a sound from a couple hundred yards away that vibrates your frickin' cage. Huh? Right? And everybody reacts differently, right? Every human being seems to react so differently to different situations. Believe me, I've seen it all. I've seen it all up north, just with grizzly bears. You'd believe how many people that you think are as intimidating as all intimidating can be with their build, their experience, their A-type, and they just crumble at the sight of a grizzly bear, or worse. And then you'll get a 16-year-old kid who bears down, drops to his one knee, and dumps a charging grizzly bear and doesn't even flinch. Huh? You know, like, I'm just saying, everybody reacts differently. And you can tell, especially from the different reactions we receive here with people hearing that noise. Some shit themselves, never go near a tree ever again. Others, like this man, says his piece and keeps going hunting. So do I. But I haven't heard that roar. But I've seen these things, and they've thrown shit at me, and on and on. I'm babbling. Coffee. I'll bite my lip instantly. This one is a frickin' encyclopedia. Should I do it? Are you guys ready for a smoking long email after yesterday's? Oh, well, okay, I'm going in. Going in, we're doing it. Here we go. Multiple events that add up to strange. That sounds familiar. Did I read this? Dear Steve, first of all, thank you for all you do. Truly. I believe it is necessary in this life to find truths in order to find peace. And as a God-loving, God-fearing, God-seeking man, I have a tendency to seek out the truth. I'm thankful, as I'm sure everyone who shares in here is, that you have continued to offer this service to the rest of us who do not or did not know what to do with these experiences. All right. I'm 57 years old and from Coldwater, Michigan. I'm an outdoors person and was a hunter most of my life. I'd like to share a couple of things that I thought about while listening to some of your other story senders. First of all, lots of Christians have come forward, and I'm not surprised that the Sabe were called forth in Jesus' name by the First Nation elders either. Think about it. There are too many instances of light being involved with these sightings as of late. While listening to that story about the guy who thought he was allowed to see through the eyes of a Sabe, which I believe could be possible. We don't know everything, obviously. I realized that they have unique abilities that involve light and sight from that story and other stories that seem to make me wonder if these aren't some sort of divine creatures. Excuse me. Which obviously you say the DNA done by our good scientists can actually prove. That unknown DNA component you talked about. And so I am not surprised that a being of light would respond to God if he and his Trinity are the only reason we have light to begin with. I mean, if you're a Bible-believing person, you have to admit it, not just understand it. And I think about this. The being afraid to tell my story and what will people think. You know, for a ton of people, the same thing happens over the fear of talking about Jesus or mentioning his name outside of church itself. This is my proof that what you have been saying about being programmed happens to everyone, whether we want to admit it or not. We can also program and reprogram ourselves, though. We are like every other species, fighting to survive, but at the same time much different about how our social system affects our ability to process, accept, and even learn truths. I'm not perfect. I have faults like everyone else, and I'm just a common farm boy from Michigan. But I'd like to share a couple of things I'd like to get off my chest, because just recently I had the creepiest sighting of my life. Okay, so thanks for listening to me. I will try to get to the point, and here it goes. First event, Sabe beings near Mammoth Cave in the 70s. I grew up in a small farm with horses and goats and dogs and about other animal. I've always had an affinity for and with animals. And yes, I hunt and respect the spirit of the great provider, but I have been able to break up dogs fighting, even that didn't belong to me. I've had the toughest of kids and dogs in my lap in the first 5 minutes. I grew up this way, always around the animals and always in tune with our farm. I ended up being a country 4-H fair king here because of my work with animals, specifically goats. I've been in and out of the woods all my life, and I've never been scared of anything in the woods while hunting. But here's why. My mom is a hairdresser and minister, too, on the side. My mom is a hairdresser and a minister, too, on the side. My dad was an excavation business owner, both God-fearing, hardworking people who took myself and my brother, who was 9 years older, and on a family trip when I was 5 or 6 years old. We went to Tennessee to the Smoky Mountains, and I had gotten, quote, lost, end quote, as my brother had told my parents, but what had really happened was he left me behind, like way behind. The kind of behind you can't hear someone yell from anymore. I'd worn a pair of new boots my parents had gotten for the trip. I still remember this. My feet hurt so bad. The new boots weren't broken in and were leaving bad blisters. And my agreeing to hike the 9 or 11 miles from Mammoth Cave to where our parents were going to meet us with the family camper ended up in my stopping to take off my shoes because my feet were bleeding. I began to cry. I was alone, terrified they were going to leave me and I would never see them again. I just wanted my mom. I remember directly thinking that. I had the best kind mom ever, Steve. I really did. And of course, that is what a kid is going to do. Want the safety of a mother or father. It seems natural, doesn't it? Well, I remember breaking into a body, shaking uncontrollable sob, and sat there with bleeding feet trying to figure out what I was going to do. I started to try to carry the boots and walk barefoot, but the blisters on the bottom made it too hard. So I sat back down and just sobbed. And all of a sudden, I heard what I thought was someone talking to me, telling me it'll be okay, but then I realized it wasn't really with words. I heard my brother yell from a long way off, apparently showed up without me at the camper and got in big trouble, and was sent back. And my brother was mad at me for messing up his time there, or whatever, and he was raging. I knew that rage. I went through a lot of things because of his rage when I was a kid. I was locked in closets and all kinds of crap. Shoved down the stairs on carpet pieces to see what would happen. I think he takes meds for that. Now for that. Smiles. Anyway, I'd seen him be a weird kind of mean before, and he was certainly raging. You could hear it in his voice as he was approaching down the trail. He wasn't where we saw each other quite yet, and suddenly a giant hand reached around me delicately and pulled me up and into its hairy chest and stood behind the tree I was sitting at the base of. And I can't explain it, but we couldn't be seen. I somehow knew it too. My brother walked less than 15 feet from us, walked right by, yelling my name over and over, and just kept going down the trail and out of sight and hearing. And as soon as he was out of sight, this being sort of let me a little loose on the grip, as if to let me know all was clear, and let me away from its chest. Just a tad. And I could feel this thing arguing with the being standing right behind us. There was a second being, and he was huge. The first, I am sure, was female, and she had a hold of me And I think she was arguing with a male about what to do with me at that point. And finally, I felt some sort of agreement they had had. And the next thing I know, we're a couple miles down the trail. We're supposed to meet our parents at the camper at the end of the trail. I do not know what happened to that time, or if we were just transported there all of a sudden. That part is fuzzy. I don't know. All I remember is looking back behind her and seeing the larger one behind me with a serious look on his face as her large hand put me down and out and away from her. And as she set me down, had me point toward the camper, which we could actually see a couple hundred yards or less away. And as she set me down, I had these overwhelming thoughts of confusion. Holy shit. Probably because of the overwhelming events my brain was experiencing. These thoughts were quickly misplaced by reassurances from these beings that everything was okay. And they said specifically, he can't get you now. You have your people. And as she stood there, she let out a little bit of a smile, kinda. Hard to explain. But I was being told to go to my parents, that they were helping me. And as I stood there looking back, I was frozen. I don't know if it was fear or confusion, but I was in this place in my mind where I had no direction. And that being knew it and knew how to communicate to me that it was okay. And suddenly she reached down, patted my butt forward in a nudge kind of thing, as if to urge me along. And they were both chatting to each other quietly in the same language of their own and looking back as if to make sure my brother wouldn't get to me before my parents did. Steve, I know this is an unusual story, but it lived in my mind for years as a repressed memory that I feared no one would ever believe. Feels good to share it in here. Hopefully this will hit home with someone and help someone, or maybe someone else has had a similar experience. Or maybe it will jar their memory for the things we have been forced to hold as secrets because of the brain training we've received. And as you say, Steve, we've been programmed to accept only certain things. And like I said, I am programmed as a result of myself, and I believe God I am programmed as a result of myself, and I believe God to have tune with animals. And I have never, ever experienced anything like what I experienced with these beings. They have a language, they have feelings, and they have loyalty, and at times have been merciful and helpful, even saving some people in some instances. I can't believe they're all evil. Whether I want to hang out with them every day or not may differ, but I still respect them and their existence and have no animosity for them. More of a very cautious interest. Like the kind that says, tell me more, but you don't have to necessarily show me. I've seen enough to know the reality of their existence, and these beings are not animals. They may have some strange DNA, but they are beings. How can they not be when we share similar DNA, just like your opening intro says? Event number 2. I know you're mainly a Sabe channel, but you say to send it all in, so here it goes. The other 2 events that I will share today. Let her rip. You've got my attention. I'm 57 years old now. When I was like 22 or 23, I was driving around on a Friday night with my friend and roommate. This guy is as quiet as a church mouse all the time. I mean, he rarely talks. He's one of my besties, so we talked quite a bit, but he wouldn't join group conversation. Just extremely shy. A really great guy, too. A great athlete and driven cross-country runner. And we were driving around doing nothing, wasting a couple of hours, and we drove from Coldwater, Michigan, where we live, to Sturgis, Michigan, and then went south, came across Indiana, 120 from Howe, Indiana, headed toward Angola, Indiana, which has driving through Orlando, Indiana. And these are all small Indiana towns. I drove through Orlando and got to the east side, and there is a curve there, and it jogs left and curves back around to the right in a big semicircle kind of thing. And as we got just into the curve, I saw a light a really bright light, the kind I'm used to seeing on commercial job sites. Like it lights up everything bright it shines on. I saw a flicker of that bright light through the wooded area on the right in such a way it grabbed my attention. I usually keep my eyes on the road, but this was light you couldn't ignore. It was that kind of power, and it all but made me look toward it. And he saw the flicker too. I saw him look because I had to look across him on the passenger side to see to my right, and he glanced back at me with a look of confusion because it looked as if the light was turned on and then off again or something. So we kept looking that direction, and as we were rounding the curve, we came to a 2-track driveway that led back into those woods where there was a small house and I think a shutter garage back in the cutout of wooded area back in there. It was quaintly hidden and had been around for years. It wasn't new. But anyway, as we approached that driveway, where we could see for those 3 seconds down the driveway and see back into the wooded area, where we saw those lights initially, a huge light clicked on and illuminated the whole area back there, and we could see a disc-shaped object hovering over that house with the brightest lights I've ever seen coming out of it, shining down onto the ground. This light wasn't on until we got right there. It turned on as we were crossing that driveway, and I saw it clearly come on because it was dark back in there, and I was trying to figure out where that light had come from, and then bam, it came on, and suddenly I really didn't want to know. Smiles. Welcome to the club and no return, right, Sean? Thanks, Steve. I listen to your channel so much, I can almost hear you say it. But yeah, when that light clicked on, I was driving my Mazda SE5 pickup, and I put it all the way back down into third from fifth gear, Steve. And I floored it. And when I say I floored it, my friend had to hold on. I buried the speedometer the whole way, and we were both watching the mirrors, freaked out. And we got home and checked the sky a few times, and then just let it go, and never spoke of it again. And you know, his shyness, I was thinking we would never speak of it again, but 2 years ago I saw him and just happened to ask, hey, do you remember that one day we were driving around and came out of Orland? And he very quickly stated, you mean when we saw that UFO? And I knew then it wasn't a dream or a delusion. And I will not allow anyone to program me that way. I know what I saw. It was real. There are things we can't explain. The governments pretend we are so stupid, and we don't need to know. Sad stuff. Good that we can share in here. And thanks for this, Steve. Seriously. No problem. It's too easy. Event number 3. Strange rabbit-eared being near Morrison Lake, Coldwater, Michigan. Steve, I had this happen 3 months ago. During football season, I go to my friends for the Detroit Lions games, and we watch the games with friends. I live in Union City. I drive home afterwards, and it's a nice little country drive. On the way home on this night, I saw something in the road right in the path of my car headlights, and I cannot explain, and have no clue what to even call it yet. My friend said to refer to it as Springtrap because of what I told him. It stood up over a deer that it was standing over in the road. I don't know if it was roadkill or what, and I was certainly not going to stop to find out once I saw this creature in my headlights. In fact, I gave the car some gas trying to get as far from it as I could. It stood up onto 2 feet and looked right at me, as if it was really mad and wanted to do something about it, but saw the car coming and knew it had to move, and I wasn't stopping, even if I had to hit it. I would try not to, but if I had to, I would. But it turned so quickly toward the right side of the road, which is heading east toward the lake because I was heading north on River Road. And this thing jumped in one jump and cleared the whole road and the ditch on the other side and a little quick second hop, and it was 15 feet on the other side of the fence, on the other side of the ditch. But the thing was, this thing's feet were like rabbit, but huge, like 2 or 3 feet long, and he shot off them like a rabbit or a frog. And its ears were different. Sort of reminded me of Yoda's ears from Star Wars. They were pointed at the end, but were floppier and longer and sat back over his head and onto his shoulders. They weren't upright. And this thing showed its teeth. And it had some nasty looking teeth, although it was really quick. I know what I saw. And I just happened to let the YouTube run one day while doing dishes, and it was your channel, Steve, but your video was over but your video was over and another started, and somehow, I believe it was the grace of God, there was a story on someone's channel about someone who was an atheist and says he died and went to hell and was shown things there. He talked about the demons he saw, Steve. I became a little interested, so I kind of paid attention to it instead of changing it. And he comes out with a startling statement about demons with rabbit's feet. No kidding. I saved it on my YouTube list. You say there is something coming, and I truly wonder, is this a sign of the times? A sign of the world's corruption blowing up in all of our faces? I don't know. But I do know what I saw. I've seen other things I can't explain. Maybe someday I'll share them too. But these three have confirmed to me that we're all treated like mushrooms and kept in the dark and fed a bunch of BS. I love your efforts and your style. I would love to sit down at your round table anytime. Yeah, I don't believe the Sabe beings are all evil. These ones from the first event communicated to me that they were not going to let me get hurt by someone, even from inside my own family. So you can't tell me they're all evil, like you say. If they wanted to kill us, they certainly could, with all the things these beings out there are capable of, according to the real people out here sending you in real stories. And by the way, the people from the Bigfoot ripoff organization are self-exposing idiots, as they have been to begin with. They blow their horns, throw a parade for monkeys. And the missing link? Come on now. Haha. How many times does science have to prove the Bible is right before we figure out there is stuff we do not know and may never know? I'm just a guy. I won't tell you my IQ because you will hold me accountable for it. And I make mistakes the same as others, but I have no need to lie or prove anything to anyone. But this is my story, and I'm sticking to it. And you can feel free to share. My name is Sean Toth. Thanks. Hell's that? Dirt bike. Sorry. It's a loud sound out of the blue, right? And there you go. Appreciate you sending that in, man. What a pile of events. It's funny, I was just thinking when you were explaining how that being had a hold of you and his female, I was thinking to myself, well, if Sarah was a Sasquatch, that's what she'd be doing. She's like a mom through and through. Through and through. Caring for everything. Trying to keep everything safe. Cuddly animals and kids. And sounds like, from what I gather from what you're trying to get across to, it sounds like your brother was a little darker than what we would normally view as a sibling being angry. Sounds like he was pretty frickin' angry and violent, right? So, I know what they say. They say these beings know our demeanors right off the word go, so kind of makes sense in a way. Probably had some kind of a oversensitive female there and didn't want to see this poor innocent kid get the shit beat out of him. And he's already in excruciating pain. And no one there that was willing to help. And then what happened, right? Bunch of crazy shit's going on. You got to see it. And carry it. At least now you got to share it, right? That the bright light, that's not uncommon, is it? You know, even Sarah's family out in New Brunswick on the farm, fairly remote, And the whole family saw something lighting up the back timber way up back, exact same way you described it. Lit the whole frickin' place up. And they all saw it together. Nobody went out there. They went back in the house. Right. There's a lot of people also have reported in about the whole sky just becoming bright as daylight, like that. And then going back to pitch black midnight again. I don't know what that's about. And how many times have people reported in of seeing some kind of a frickin' creature stand over top of a dead animal on the road and looking pissed. That's so common. That's almost a pattern mentioned too, right? People driving down the highway. Here's this thing. Looked like it was feeding on the roadkill, and it looked at us like it was pissed. Said so many people, right? Excuse me. There you go. Let's see who chimes in the comment section below, or emails what they know into me from the same area. Maybe somebody's seen the same thing you saw, right? On the road. There you go. There's another voice heard. It's funny. I'm going to tell you guys, take a little break from the emails. I'll tell you guys a funny story. Your email reminded me of a friend of mine, guide partner up north years back, his cousin, who lives in rural Alberta. He came to be our wrangler one fall, and this guy didn't talk. Just didn't talk. And I'm yappy as usual, right? Chucking shit at everybody and just being a clown all the time, clowning around at camp. And this guy did not talk. Did you get the horses okay this morning? And he'd just be like, yep. That's all he did, was just shake his head. I couldn't get him to do guy talk, nothing, like just trying to chuck the ball back and forth. Just wouldn't do it. The guy didn't talk, but he did his job. How old would he have been? I don't know. He's probably 20 anyway. But here's the funny part. So I had to leave. I don't know where I went. I went somewhere. I think I got flown out in the bush plane, and I went to go fill in for somebody who got injured in another camp, and then dropped off to another remote camp. And while I was gone, the story goes, so this guy, we'll just call him the Wrangler. So he's in our cabin. There's two cabins. So you got our cabin, where myself and the hunters will be, and then the other cabin, my partner and his wife would be the cook would be in the other cabin. That's it. We're in the middle of frickin' nowhere. And he said that my partner said that our Wrangler got up from dinner, and when you get up from dinner, you got to go out the front of the cabin, around the back of the cabin, and then straight back to our cabin, the hunter cabin, in the dark. And the hunters, they had one hunter in camp, and he's still in the cook shack with them. And so the Wrangler, who doesn't talk, doesn't make a sound ever, leaves to go into the other cabin to go to bed, read a book or whatever, right? Time to go to bed. And they're sitting in the cook shack cabin, bullshitting away. And they just heard this banging. They could hear this banging on the wall. Like he's had a hammer, like he's hammering on something in the cabin, the other cabin. And the other cabin is about, I don't know, maybe 25 feet from the back of the cook shack cabin, when there's no windows in the back of the cook shack either. There's a window in the side, and the front door, and a window in the front. So anyways, my partner said that, yeah, I just heard this bang, like he's banging on the wall and banging and banging and banging. And finally, my partner goes out of the cabin and says, hey, what are you doing? And all of a sudden, he screamed at the top of his lungs, there's a bear out here! I got chased in the cabin by a grizzly bear. And I guess the poor guy, that's what it took to get him to speak. He went from the cook shack in the dark to go in the other cabin, and there's a grizzly bear out there, and the grizzly bear rushed him and chased him right up onto the porch, and he slammed the door on the bear. And he was banging on the wall with a hammer to get everybody's attention. Funny the shit that I get reminded of while I'm reading people's experiences, right? They ended up shooting that bear too. It's an 8-foot bear. Anyway, there you go. I gotta go in. I got a whole pile of stuff I gotta get done. A lot of people I gotta talk to, and I just got a lot of stuff to get caught up on. And I will be back, and I'm gonna share a lot more soon. All right. So, share my story at howtohunt.com. Get it off your chest. Get it shared.